Hi, this is Christine from Greenbook. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar brought to us by Hotspex. Today we have Shane Skillen and Jonathan LaGreca, and they're here to talk to us about innovation versus disruption. Have you future-proofed your career? So with that said, let me go over a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, your lines are muted. So typically we would have you put questions in the chat box, but today our speakers would like you to send the questions directly to them. So you can send those to Shane Skillen at hotspex.com. That's SHANE.SKILLEN at Hotspex, HOTSPEX.com. So you go ahead and do that for your questions, and then also I want to let you know that we are recording today, and you will receive an email within a couple of days with a link to the recording so that you can go back and review it if you like. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Shane and Jonathan.
Hotspex brings you the Innovation versus Disruption webinar, presented by Hotspex CEO Shane Skillen and VP of Growth Jonathan LaGreca.
Oh, hi there. I'm Shane Skillen, founder and CEO of Hotspex. I'm joined here today by my colleague, Jonathan LaGreca, who leads growth at Hotspex. He's an amazing individual. We can't be actually in the same place today, but through the miracles of technology, we're going to share some amazing stuff with you, and I hope you find it interesting. I'm also happy to say that Jonathan is one of my best friends, as are several other amazing people that work at Hotspex, and I'm just very lucky to be able to work with such an amazing group of people. Today, we're going to talk about the notion of innovate or die. There's a tremendous amount of disruption coming. Look at the pace of change that's happened. I mean, look at the year 2000. It's been a vertical increase in the explosion of technology. If you look at that a little bit more deeply on how close are computers to replicating human intelligence. And so the forecast is that in the year 2020 here, right where you see that number 3 is, by the way, all these slides are available later if you just ask us, that human consciousness and human intelligence can be replicated by the year 2020, and then all human intelligence can be replicated by the year up at the top there, 2045. So that's going to have interesting impacts for our industry. Here's Fortune saying that technology is going to replace 80% of what doctors do. Then The Economist talks about the probability of different jobs being replaced by artificial intelligence. You look down there at the bottom, you see telemarketers virtually guaranteed to have those replaced by technology. And I think that anything under sort of where those economists are is the danger zone. I think that as insights people, we could be more editors of insights and make meaning of what's going on out there, moving beyond the what to the so what and the now what. More on that after we hear from Jonathan, some of our clients. I'd also like to highlight what Zappy Store is doing. I think they are the catalyst for change, the same way that Tesla is changing global automotive. I think Ryan Barry in particular is one of the most amazing individuals that I've ever met, and I'm so happy that he's working in an industry. He was actually speaking at South by Southwest recently. I also want to highlight that I've seen Google Trends presented at client sites now as a complete replacement to brand tracking. And as a result, some interesting things are happening where you see Kantar revenue fell last year by 2%. And as a result, they've actually built their own Zappy Store, which is what they're actually talking about here in this photo. And you see even Nielsen actually saw its revenue fall quite dramatically. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Jonathan, who's gonna talk a lot about future proofing, because a lot of change is happening. We want to give you some tips and tools to make sure that you're ready for the change that's coming.
Thank you, Shane. So yes, we spoke to many different insight leaders about two things. The first was their ideas around insights innovation, and secondly, their advice on how to future-proof your career. Now, before we share that wisdom with you, very quick disclaimer. Any of the opinions shared by the parties in this webinar are considered to be their own personal opinions and are not to be associated with any specific organizations. So with that, let's get into it. You've probably seen this before. The idea of faster, better, cheaper. The old adage was that you only could pick 2 of these 3, and you'd have to sacrifice the third. But the reality is, in today's world, the expectation is that you need to deliver against all 3 of these. This came up in speaking with several insight leaders, and I'm going to share some of the insight that Michelle Gansley had for us on this specific topic. Michelle Gansley is the Global Gum Insights Leader at Mars Wrigley, and I'm going to pause now just to share her wisdom.
Technology is having a massive impact on the insights industry. The massive proliferation in technology and data means that consumers expect more from us. and competitors also have the same access to information as we do now. So it's no longer about having the right insight. It's about how fast we can move on it, or our ability to see consumer needs and solutions even before they can see it.
So what I found interesting about Michelle's perspective was this idea of data democratization, the fact that over time, we're all going to have access to many of the same data points and even maybe several of the same insights. So the key to winning is speed. But speed isn't the only aspect of this. We also spoke to Joe Amati, Head of Research, Insights and Marketing Operations at Canada Goose. Joe talked about how it's really hard to balance the idea of fast, quick learning with some of the slower, more in-depth learning that leads to better decisions. Let's hear what Joe had to say on this topic.
What scares me most is departments relying more and more on soft learnings. These would be things such as vanity metrics that the digital marketing team can provide, such as click-through rates. These would also be their review of comment sections, of what people are saying in social media, or of just the confirmation bias that they have when they're walking through the market and see our product. In a lot of cases, they're relying more and more on these because they're quick, they're instantaneous. Even in this era of DIY and behavioral research, proper sound research just takes a long time to do, and they're often impatient for it.
What I like about Joe's perspective on this is that, yes, faster and cheaper are both very important, but you can't lose sight of the better as well. We also had the pleasure of speaking with Olga Bernstein, Consumer Insights Manager of Pepsico. Olga took us on a journey of the Consumer Insights function and talked about how it wasn't so long ago that we spent a lot of our time and energy trying to convince people the value of learning journeys, of testing different concepts, ideas, and advertising. She wonders if today we've gotten to a point where we're over-testing things. She asked the question of, can we even make a decision today without showing some types of numbers from consumer testing? In addition to that, Olga really urged us to think about the type of research we're doing. So yes, it's important to think about faster, better, cheaper, but what type of research are you doing? A lot of the research that we end up doing tends to be validation. Sometimes we move up from that to optimization, but ultimately, Olga challenged us to try to move further upstream, to inspire ideas at the very onset of the creative, innovation, or design journey. Some really good wisdom there from Olga. In speaking with Steve Olson, Consumer and Shopper Insights Manager from Nestlé, he reinforced some of the things that Olga was talking about, finding your way more upstream in the research journey. Let's hear what Steve had to say.
The reality is we no longer live in a world where you only get a pick between faster, better, and cheaper. The expectation is that all three of these are delivered. That said, as many of us live in worlds with budget constraints that still demands to deliver more output in less time, one of my fears is that we're always going to have this temptation to deprioritize foundational research over what those priorities are.
I really like how Steve reinforced the concept of faster, better, cheaper, but really focused in on the fact that we can't lose sight of the better and we cannot deprioritize foundational research. This brings us to our first key insight from these different conversations that we've had with consumer insight leaders. It's important to move fast, but also find time to create value with in-depth inspirational learning. As Hotspex underwent this learning journey, we wanted to supplement the conversations that we had with different consumer insights leaders with the insights from marketers and innovation and advertising experts. So we spoke to different people in different areas around the world. One of those people was Franck Escudier, International Marketing Director at Danone in Paris. Frank really challenged us to get closer to our consumers. He basically said, we all know there's a gap between what consumers say and what they actually do. The question becomes, how can you get as close to your consumers as possible to truly understand them? Let's hear more of what Frank had to say about this.
To get as close to the consumers as you can, don't be afraid to combine different tools and data sets together. You'd be surprised what information you can gather internally and how it can be combined with externally sourced data.
So the insight here is to really combine different data sets as well as different tools to try to answer your business question. Sometimes there's not a silver bullet solution, so you actually have to mix different components. I really like how he also talked about the idea of using both first-party data as well as externally sourced data to get to a better insight and to a better solution. We also spoke with Greg Dubesky, Innovation and Program Management Advertising at Amazon. Greg couldn't join us the day of the recordings, so the following clip is from Greg, voiced over by our very own Daniel Taylor.
When you get close to consumers, make sure you're paying attention to what they say. I think it was Mike Tyson that said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. You need to encourage your teams to be prepared to regularly have customers punch in the teeth of their ideas. Design clear, actionable, and testable hypotheses via a learning plan that actively pursues the hardest, what needs to be true questions. And then you have to be willing to completely scrap your ingoing assumptions if the actual behavior exhibited by customers in the learning phase shatters your ingoing assumptions. If you're going to get close to your consumers, you have to also listen to them.
Amazing. Doesn't everything sound better in a British accent? Anyhow, what I really liked about Greg's insights was the fact that if you're going to invest in getting closer to consumers, you better listen to them. And sometimes that means making a tough decision and going against your initial hypothesis. That brings us to our second insight, which is to uncover meaningful insights that drive impact. It's imperative to get closer to your consumers by listening to what they have to say, but also watching the way they behave. On the topic of watching how consumers behave, one of the discussions that came across with several of the insights leaders was that they're wondering whether or not we're becoming overly obsessed with behavioral data and losing sight of the value qualitative insights can bring. We spoke with Clement Bourbon, Consumer and Market Insights Leader from Cirque du Soleil. Let's hear what he has to say on this topic.
I have a feeling that the aversion for risk is pushing marketers to take decisions as rational as possible based on past behaviors tracked across dozens of platforms, and that they forget the boldness marketing must embody sometimes, the barriers that have to be pushed, even against what common sense would suggest, to generate tremendous reactions. Campaigns that are regarded as iconic across the industry have always been beyond what people expected, so clearly beyond the way they behaved. Creativity based on a strong qualitative understanding of the industry must remain key.
So a very interesting perspective from Clement. This idea that we need to move beyond just data and really continue to encapsulate the boldness that marketing has embodied over the years to drive incredible campaigns, incredible ideas, and so forth. Another person we had the privilege of speaking with was Tiffany Yokas, VP of Strategy and Insights at Ricola. Prior to joining Ricola, she actually led the initiative to embed the laws of growth and marketing sciences within Mondelez. Tiffany had a very interesting perspective about the need to inject consumer empathy into the data discussion.
The danger of all of this is that we become more and more incapable of doing anything without a data point. Mavericks and would-be fools with ideas, empathy, and instincts are the ones who change the world. That is really the only thing we as humans are likely to bring to the table as AI and robotics flourish.
As you can see, Tiffany echoed many of the sentiments we've heard already, both from Olga from Pepsico, as well as Clement from Cirque du Soleil. I really like how she talked about the importance of creativity as a way of future-proofing our career, which we'll get more into shortly. And to wrap up this discussion on the over-reliance on data, we spoke to Kristen Griffith, Associate Director of Insights at Clorox. She said that more data does not necessarily lead to better decisions, as we've heard before from several insights leaders today. Kristen implores that we need new approaches to data integration that remain focused on the consumer perspective when determining how to leverage available data. This brings us to our third insight, which is don't completely lose yourself in the data, mixing consumer empathy and qualitative understanding. We also spoke to our consumer insights leaders to get their advice on selling through new innovative methodologies. This advice is applicable to both vendor partners who are trying to get new innovative insights methodologies into their clients' organizations, but it's also applicable to clients looking for advice on how to better navigate stakeholders when introducing new concepts into their organizations. We spoke to Joe from Canada Goose, and his advice was quite good. He said, do your best to understand how decisions are currently made and the role that these new methodologies or viewpoints can play. He really stressed the point that anything you bring into the organization needs to be assimilated into the current ways of working, or it'll be much harder to take root. Olga from Pepsi had similar advice. She said that pitching a new tool without knowing about a specific, tangible application for it in the near future is always tougher. When we spoke to Kristen from Clorox, she had some really interesting advice, and we have our very own Hotspex Sue Parker doing the voiceover because Kristen wasn't available for us the day of the recordings. Here's what Kristen had to say.
Be patient. Remind us of your solution several times. We may not bite immediately because it isn't solving a problem we are currently working on. But at the same time, we likely have forgotten about it once the need does arise.
So as you can see, very similar advice from several insights leaders when it comes to introducing new methodologies. It's so important to be fit for purpose. It's all about timing. It's also all about really finding a way to fit into the lives of either your clients or your stakeholders and understand how they're doing things today. In addition to getting the timing right when introducing new insights innovation, communications is key. Clement from Cirque du Soleil had a very simple message. Be clear. Try to stay away from making things too complex, and please don't bury people under frameworks. Michelle from Mars had a similar message, and she pointed to the fact that the proliferation of technology-based insight suppliers is staggering. Her advice was find a way to break through the clutter with a simple and distinct message about what's unique about your offering. Steve from Nestlé said, think big, start small, move fast. And as important as it is to start small with some sort of a pilot project and to move fast to build credibility, you always want to communicate the think big piece, which is really how are you solving your stakeholder or your client's problems with this new solution. Lastly, we got some really interesting insight from Tiffany. She suggested taking your company culture into consideration. Trying to figure out whether or not your company is one where there's a culture where it's a fear of missing out or a fear of failure. And depending on that, tailoring your message and communication track. So ultimately, the fifth key insight here is you need to communicate your unique proposition and how it will specifically help your key stakeholders. The last question that we asked our insight leaders was their best advice when it comes to future-proofing your career. One of the key insights that came across a lot of the different answers that we got was there's this real need to raise our digital IQs. Speaking with Kristen from Clorox, she talked about how the fact that market research is converging with the related fields of consumer experience, data science, and analytics. She said that more and more of our jobs as insight professionals will be to decipher the signal out of behavioral data and then to combine that with new techniques that help diagnose cause. Clement from Cirque du Soleil reinforced this idea of searching for a signal. He told us that it doesn't mean that only the big picture matters. Au contraire. He said that some details are almost as important, even more important than the big picture. Your value will reside in your ability to detect these details and to convince people of their importance. Then when we spoke to Greg from Amazon, his advice was in addition to being a specialist, you need to think like a generalist because a generalist is a path to thinking more like a general manager. He said that marketers should understand the consumer, but also the business as well as the tech product impact of different decisions. This leads us to our seventh insight, which is you need to be able to see the big picture, but also pay attention to very subtle details. You need to continue to work on your craft as a specialist, but also build out your skills as a generalist. There was also a reoccurring theme around the importance of continuing to learn. Tiffany from Ricola said, don't bury your head in what's comfortable, push outside your comfort zone. Whereas Joe said, stay open-minded, never stop learning. Olga from Pepsico said, keep learning, learning, and learning. And Steve, when asked about how to future-proof your career, said, I think we need to treat ourselves with the same types of approach that we treat our brands. Keep assessing that landscape every year and charting out what you need to do and how you need to change over the next few years. I think this is some really solid advice. And that advice gets us to our seventh insight, which is to stay relevant, you need to keep learning and pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. In addition to that, Olga from PepsiCo had some really good advice that I want to share with you.
Stay current. Methodologies and suppliers change all the time. Keep learning, learning, and learning. Also, always have a point of view. Take a stance. Be vocal, especially when your opinion differs from everyone else's. That's when it just might be the most important one.
So important to constantly have a point of view. Even if you're not expected to share it, always be ready with it. And while it's important to have a point of view, even when you're not expected to share one, it's so important to be able to build trust and credibility at every touch point that you have. When we were speaking with Joseph Chen from Mondelez, he talked about how you need to think beyond just that specific learning plan or that specific business question that you're trying to solve, and think about how you're creating trust and credibility across every touch point. In speaking with Mark Bertrand from Molson Coors, he said that trust and credibility are completely linked to one another. He talked a bit about that constant journey of building and reinforcing the credibility of the insights function in order to support and lead both strategical and tactical conversations with stakeholders. Here's a little bit of what Mark had to say about that topic.
Make sure to spend more time with a diverse group of internal stakeholders and external strategic partners that excel in the areas you don't have as much expertise in. This will put you at the heart of opportunities and challenges that the business may encounter.
I just love that idea of spending time with people that have expertise to help you grow more. One of the things that Mark went on to say was it's so important to be transparent with both new and legacy partners and bring them as close to the challenges you face so that they can help you tap into new ways of thinking and doing. That basically summarizes our 9th insight, which was think long game and always build trust and credibility. And now moving into our final insight, it echoes something we talked about earlier, this idea of consumer empathy and the importance of building trust and credibility with others. Ultimately, you need to remember that you're in the people business. Speaking with Tiffany at Ricola, she said, communicate and collaborate. If the machines are talking to one another, we better do the same. Michelle had a similar sentiment to say, don't forget human insights and empathy is still at the heart of our industry. Without deep understanding and empathy for people, the data means nothing. And lastly, I want to share a clip from Joseph Chen, Insight Leader from Mondelez, that really wraps this topic up nicely.
I do think you have to demonstrate passion in your role and your business. I think you have to love what you do. This will show in your day-to-day interaction with your business partners, and they will want to be around you and develop the business together.
So you heard it there from Joseph. Really, if you love what you do what you love, it's going to make people look forward to working with you. That's really great advice when it comes to future-proofing your career.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was a great job. Really also great that you were able to rally all those wonderful clients to share their views on meaningful points of advice for all of the wonderful people listening to this webinar about future-proofing, which is where I want to take us to next, the idea of future-proofing Hotspex. And, what I view my job as the chief innovator, chief future-proofer. And thankfully, we've got a wonderful team at Hotspex around us that we collaborate on to do exactly that. And it's great that the team is so innovative because, we don't always get it right. A lot of times we fail. And thankfully, we've got a patient team that every morning comes in curious about what the future holds and how we can push the bounds of what insights and what Hotspex can do. So many of you might have know that we're very focused on intellectual property development at Hotspex and on the non-conscious. That all comes down to this map that we've had for about 10 years that many of our clients call the unified theory of brand. To upgrade it, we actually brought amazing behavioral scientists on, such as Dr. Dan Young, who was at P&G for 30 years, to actually help us create a new implicit methodology, which many of our clients have told us is the best one in the world, which is great because we invested a considerable time, money, and brain power in it. The map, works with heat, which you may have seen before. The hotter it is, it's the higher percentage of people feeling that about the map, or about the emotions that are actually on that map. And then a new use case that we've just recently deployed is this brand fit matching score, where we can actually look for coherency between brands and all of the things that they put into market through omni-channel marketing and through all their products. So the idea is you can take a brand and you can match it to athletes, Instagrams, commercials, shoes, and shirts. And then on the next slide here, you can see how the scores generate between a comparison between brand maps and stimuli maps. Here's an athlete matching to a leading athletic brand with a 55 score. You see Spieth's got a little bit better, 73 score. Tom Brady, controversial individual. Not everybody loves him. Could be the greatest ever, but sometimes people don't like that in America. And I would say that this methodology actually allowed our clients to actually see that insight. Then you see a very good match for the specific athletic brand here in Michael Phelps. So new ways to use the map is something that we're laser focused on. And we've got about 20 different applications right now, and we're working on 10 different ones. But any given quarter, we're always looking to find new applications for the map. On that note, we're always looking for ways to ingest data now, and we've just created a new platform where we're actually going to be ingesting credit and debit card transactional data from an opt-in panel where they're totally aware that we're doing that, but we're going to be able to capture billions of credit and debit card transactions that we can start to mine and understand through machine learning and bring that to marry with our primary research data to understand interesting new patterns and pathways and opportunities to grow brands. The next point I want to make is about developing client empathy. And, to do that, we thought the best thing we could do was launch our own product. And so we did. We launched a male grooming product. It's a pomade. It's now for sale on Amazon. And to launch it, we had to partner with a stylist that I've actually been known for 18 years. And I'm very proud to say he's been doing my hair for 18 years. And he's awesome. But he didn't know much about product positioning, packaging, media, advertising, and then retailing on Amazon. And so we've had to learn all that with him. And it's been great because now we understand what our clients go through, thinking about how to commercialize and launch things. And we've taken those learnings and embedded them back across our organization. And now as an organization, we now understand and have more empathy to what our clients go through day in and day out. Next point I want to make is to look for new ways to add value where big budgets live. So we tried to figure out what can we do with our map where there's huge budgets, and we couldn't find a bigger budget than the global media budget, which is $2.4 trillion, says the Harvard Business Review. And so last year we bought a media company, Wave Digital, and these folks are amazing. They've come in and had a major impact on our culture and on our product. We're now actually deploying media actively through a partnership with Google to dozens of clients using something called cognitive media targeting, which uses our map to decode how the whole internet, so all video content and all web content that Google crawls, how that makes people feel. It's all been ingested into our map using Google's machine learning. And then we can actually map back ads and brands to content that's in the same space. So we create mood matching with media to boost media efficiency, and we call it cognitive media targeting. We've started to win several awards as a result of that, and our clients are very happy because there's nothing better than return on ad spend. The amazing altruistic angle to that is that now we're actually making advertising more palatable for people. People do not like ads. In the age of Netflix and ad blockers, people just don't want to see ads. If you can align the mood that they're in with the content they're watching with an ad that they see, it's less off-putting and less jarring. And actually the whole viewing experience is better and they're more accepting of ads. And we know this to be true because we can see skip rates drop very, very significantly when we create that match. The next point I want to make is about automation. I talked before about Zappy Store, which is an amazing company. I think that is going to have a significant impact to a lot of different things in the market. Kantar has also launched its own Zappy Store. We now are launching our own Zappy Store, and we've actually launched one of these for the largest bank and largest brand and largest organization in all of Canada called RBC, which is an amazing client of ours doing amazing things. I mean, you want to look at an organization that's truly looking to future-proof themselves. I find none better than RBC, where they've created a whole group called Ventures, which goes beyond banking. So we've given them a toolkit where they can just, in an automated way, start to test things like partnerships and advertising and different images and concepts. Our Hotspex twist on it to always use our map, because we put our map into everything we do, is are these ideas coherent with the brand? There can be very good ideas, but they could be off-brand, and if they go into market, they can actually confuse people what that brand's all about. The best brands in the world, and I think Apple does a better job of this than any other brand, are coherent across all touch points. So no matter where you bump into a brand, it makes you feel exactly the same way. Next point I want to make is about developing thought leadership. And Jonathan and I have partnered amazingly on this. And Esther Vlessing at Hotspex is also helping out with this quite a bit. We've started to talk to CMOs about a number of things, largely focused on what keeps them awake at night. What that creates for us is a great deal of relevance, because we now understand what the primary focus of any marketing department is at the clients we work with and clients in general, because we're figuring out what's keeping CMOs awake at night. And so it's created this amazing content that we can share back. And Jonathan writes a lot about this. I highly suggest you follow him on LinkedIn. His content is just amazing. It's intelligent. It's thoughtful, it's entertaining, and it's hugely impactful. So if you want to make sure you know what's going on, I suggest you follow Jonathan, because he has a lot to say, and he's very, very close to what's happening in the zeitgeist of marketing. We're actually taking that and extending that into a podcast. So we're starting to do, actually, it's a video podcast of CMOs. And then the last thing I want to make a point on is, it's really about the people inside Insights organizations, and that can be on the client side, on the vendor side. At Hotspex, we really want to make sure that we're future-proofing our staff's careers. And because everything around the what is getting automated, and it's getting robots are coming for that, the so what, know what, now what can still very much be human. It could be consulting. And so we've asked that all our staff read the McKinsey Mind. I know a bunch of them are almost through it. It's McKinsey, ex-McKinsey consultants unpacking what they do and how they actually do it. And what that will allow you to do when and hopefully if you read this book is to understand just how to think through problems and how to be consultants and actually make sense of that into impactful recommendations that can grow businesses and grow brands. And by doing so, you actually grow yourself and grow your careers. And so with that, I'm going to close. I'd like to thank Jonathan a lot. We couldn't be in the same place today, but I thank him a lot for his contribution to this amazing webinar. He's an amazing individual. We did promise we'd give people Uber Eats coupons. If you attended, we'd love to do that. Simply send me an email, and if Uber Eats is available in your country, we'll send you a coupon. Thank you so much for your time today. I've got a lot of hope in the future of the Insights business, and it's going to have a lot to do with the people that took the time to be curious about what we had to say here today, because it's folks like all of you that are going to be the leaders that make sure that our whole industry is future-proofed. Thank you so much. Have a great day. If there's anything you think myself or Jonathan or anybody at Hotspex can do for you, please don't hesitate to get in touch. If you'd like any of these slides, please email and ask, and I hope we can count on your vote when the grit comes out in just a few weeks. This is a wonderful report, and I think your participation in it is actually important too, because it helps everybody understand what the trends are. Thank you so much. Bye.